Welcome to The Explainer. All right, so the Chancellor has just dropped a major speech, basically laying out the entire game plan ahead of the UK budget. And it's all built around threes. Three priorities, three big challenges, and a three-part solution. So let's get into it.
Okay, so here's how we're going to tackle this. First up, we'll look at what the government is saying are Britain's big priorities. Then we'll zoom out to see the global economic picture they're dealing with. After that, we're going to get into this thing called the productivity puzzle, what it is and why it matters. Then the big one, the $2.9 trillion debt question. And finally, we'll wrap up with the Chancellor's three-part plan to fix it all.
So, right at the start, the speech framed the whole budget around what it calls three core priorities. And the message here is, look, these aren't just some goals we pulled out of thin air. These are meant to reflect what the British people are most worried about right now.
And what are they? Well, it all boils down to these three things: protecting the NHS, getting a handle on that national debt, and of course, easing the cost of living. The big claim here is that these three pillars are going to be the foundation for every single decision made in the budget.
Okay, but before jumping into any solutions, the Chancellor spent some time painting a pretty stark picture of the world as it is right now, not how anyone would wish it to be. And that picture, well, it's one of some pretty serious outside pressures squeezing the UK economy.
And this quote really sums it all up, doesn't it? It is my job to deal with the world as we find it, not the world as I wish it to be. This is all about setting a tone of, tough, pragmatic reality. It's the government's way of saying, we're not working with a wish list here, we're dealing with the hand we've been dealt. The speech basically described a perfect storm of pressures hitting the public finances. You've got these global economic headaches on one side, things like messy supply chains keeping inflation high and the cost of government borrowing going up everywhere. Then, on the other side, you've got these huge domestic commitments, like needing to spend more on defense and reform welfare. You put all that together, and it creates this massive squeeze on the nation's wallet.
All right, so moving on from those immediate short-term pressures, the speech then pivots to a much, much deeper problem, a long-term issue that's been dragging the UK economy down for years.
So yeah, you've probably heard this phrase thrown around a lot by economists and commentators, Britain's productivity puzzle. But what on earth does that actually mean? What does that jargon mean for the country? And more importantly, what does it mean for you?
Well, to put it simply, productivity is just a measure of how much bang we get for our buck, how much economic value is created for every hour someone works. And the argument in the speech is that for decades, the UK has been putting in the hours but not getting the results. It's been working hard, but maybe not smart. And this isn't just some abstract number on a chart. It has a real impact on everything, from your wages to the quality of public services. And this is where it gets really interesting, because it shows how this abstract economic idea hits us in our day-to-day lives. The speech directly connects low productivity to things we all see and feel, right? Roads riddled with potholes, trains that are always late, painfully slow broadband, and sky-high energy prices. The argument is that these are all symptoms of the same root cause, a long-term lack of consistent investment. But here's the kicker. The big argument from the speech is that, actually, this isn't a puzzle at all. The Chancellor's view is that the cause is pretty obvious, which she calls a chronic stop-go cycle of public investment. Basically, years of turning the funding tap on and off has starved the country's infrastructure of what it needs to really thrive. And that history of unsteady investment, well, it leads us right to the single biggest challenge, the biggest constraint mentioned in the whole speech, the national debt.
So what's the number? The speech puts this absolutely staggering figure on the table, a national debt of £2.9 trillion. Just let that sink in for a second.
Now, a number that big is hard to get your head around. So to put it into perspective, that's equivalent to 95% of the UK's entire annual economic output. It's like your personal debt being almost as much as your entire yearly salary. It's huge. But okay, what does that debt actually cost us right now? The speech highlights a pretty sobering fact. For every £10 you pay in tax, £1 of that doesn't go to schools, it doesn't go to hospitals, it doesn't even go to paying down the actual debt. Nope, it just goes to paying the interest on the debt. It's like just paying the interest on your credit card and never touching the balance. So, faced with this mountain of debt, the Chancellor basically presents the country with a crossroads, two very different paths. On one side, you have what's called fiscal discipline, That means sticking to really strict rules to get the debt down. On the other side, you have what the speech labels accounting tricks. Stuff like shuffling spending around to make it look like you have more room to borrow than you actually do. The warning is that while that might look good on paper, it can't change the cold, hard economic reality.
Okay, so after laying out all the problems, you've got the global pressures, the low productivity, the massive debt, the speech finally got to the proposed solution, a three-part plan that's meant to be the bedrock of the upcoming budget.
The whole strategy really rests on three big ideas that are supposed to work together. It all starts with step one, stability. The idea is you get the debt under control first. Once you have that stability, that creates the confidence needed for step two, investment, getting both the government and private companies to pour money into the country. And then, finally, all that investment gets unlocked by step three, reform, which is all about slashing the red tape and shaking up the old rules that are holding back growth. See how they're meant to connect?
And a really big piece of this plan involves the government practicing what it preaches, basically turning that productivity lens on itself. The target is to find a whopping £14 billion in inefficiencies every year. How? By doing things like cutting spending on expensive consultants, getting rid of bureaucratic bodies, embracing new tech like AI, and just generally rooting out waste wherever they can find it. And the speech wrapped up on this really defiant, you could say, optimistic note, a direct rejection of the idea that a stuttering economy and falling living standards are just Britain's destiny now. It's framed as a call to action, a strong argument that a totally different future is possible, but only if the right and probably tough choices are made. But in the end, this speech really just sets the stage, right? It lays out the philosophy, but it keeps the specific and, let's be honest, probably painful decisions under wraps for the budget itself. It frames the problems, it offers a strategy, but it leaves us all with this one huge, crucial question. The Chancellor is promising hard choices are on the way. So, what could those choices actually look like for you, for your family, for businesses, and for public services right across the country?